Yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody to Kent Freedom Movement's presentation from Chris Everard. It's good to see so many people here tonight and a lot of new faces. That's great. I'm sure you're in for a bit of a treat here. We've got Chris Everard, one of the world's most knowledgeable researchers and filmmakers into the global elites and also otherworldly things like the spirit world, and he's done many great films about the Illuminati and spirit world and secret space. And he's got his own TV channel, enigmatv.com, as well. So we're in for a wealth of knowledge tonight, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Everard.
Hello everybody. Well, this is sort of, not the most perfect place to do a talk, but, it's a real place with a real crowd. We've got a real football match going on in the background. I've travelled like over 1,000 miles to come here. I'm doing another talk like this in another pub very similar to this in Bristol. That's on the 17th. And then basically for the next year I'm doing a world tour of all these different countries. I'm doing Egypt and Australia, I'm doing the USA, doing Spain, Portugal, Greece, France, and then I'll be back in the UK in a year's time. Like Chris said, I run the Enigma channel, which is it's actually the world's first global TV station. It was started 11 years ago, and the reason I started the TV channel is because what I wanted to do is broadcast documentaries and movies about subjects which the mainstream media either ignore or they point blank refuse to cover certain subjects in the media. So since that time, 11 years ago, there's been 100,000 viewers, and I've been making feature-length documentaries, and the 12th feature-length documentary that I've made is come out this week, and we're back in France at the moment, packing and shipping all of these DVDs going all over the world, and people upload them onto video sharing websites, and there's 250 million viewings of my films on the internet right now. And there is an awakening. There's an awakening of people who are interested in more than just football. They're interested in more than just what is dished out to them in the mainstream media. And a lot of people, let's face it, what is it today? Monday, Tuesday? It's Tuesday night, we're in Gravesend, we're in a pub. There's lots and lots of things that you could have all been choosing to do, but you all chose to come here. And there are millions and millions and millions and millions of people worldwide who are like you, that have chosen to actually sort of unplug themselves from what the mainstream media dish up all of the time, and to get themselves informed about really what is going on in the world. And all I can say is that about 20 years ago, when I used to watch the TV, especially when I used to watch programs like Question Time on the BBC, I used to always wonder why certain questions weren't being asked, and why the answers weren't fulfilling my interest in what was going on in the geopolitical situation. And gradually, over the last 20 years, I've put together the entire jigsaw puzzle of how this geopolitical situation is organised. And the first thing I'd like to say is we need to recognise who actually controls the geopolitical situation. We need to actually understand that the economic situation that we see reported on the media, with this boom and bust cycle where one sort of set of years you get yuppies, where you buy a luxury flat and you get a free Porsche, and then several years later there's a recession. and then it goes into another cycle of yuppies, and then another cycle of recession. The economy is controlled, and all money supply, all cash, it doesn't matter what currency you're talking about, is all based on diamonds, platinum, silver, gold, rubies, emeralds, that was stolen from the Indian subcontinent and stolen from the African continent in the 18th and 19th centuries. In the wake of this asset stripping of India and Africa, two things happened. We ended up in Europe with the richest families that have ever walked the face of the planet, and at the same time we have famine, starvation, incredible medical problems, bad sanitation. That's the upshot of what the asset stripping did in the 19th century. So who are those people? Who asset stripped India? Who asset stripped Africa 200 years ago? The simple and true answer is it comes down to about 5 different families. They are not the families whose names you see mentioned in the most popular books about the so-called New World Order. They are families who basically they're royal, they're aristocratic, but they've used fake names to hide their identities throughout history. Sitting on the British throne at the moment we have what we call the Windsors. That's not their name. Windsor is a fake name which they've used as a cover story since the beginning of the 20th century. Their real name, the Queen's real name, is Saxe Coburg Gotha. And these are 3 towns which are in Bavaria in Germany. They're not British, their actual roots are in Bavaria in Germany, and they are the Bavarian British royal elite. And alongside them you have the Schleswig, Holstein, Glucksburg, Sondersburg family, and that's the real name of Prince Philip. He's not Greek, he's not Danish, he's German. And his real name is Philip Schleswig, Holstein, Glucksburg, Sondersburg. His name is not Mountbatten, and his name is not Battenberg. That is the name of his great uncle, Lord Louis Mountbatten. And Lord Louis Mountbatten said, as soon as Philip married Princess Elizabeth, who became Queen Elizabeth, Lord Louis Mountbatten said, hey, now you should change the family name and you should become the Windsor Mountbattens. And that was unacceptable, and therefore they killed him. And his boat being exploded in Ireland was blamed on the IRA. And I'm afraid this is a typical example of how the royal political elite work. What they will do is they will kill, stab, slash their way through history, taking anything they want, and blame the assassination on a so-called terrorist group. And if you question what I'm saying, then you should ask yourselves, why is it that we had the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, and the real IRA? The reason that the real IRA was started is because they were the real people who really wanted an Irish Republic, who had nothing to do with the terrorism that had gone before. And all across the world we see assassinations, murders, kidnappings being blamed on fake terrorists. And just recently we've had a thing in the news with Gareth Williams. Hands up who's heard about Gareth Williams. MI6 officer, also worked for GCHQ, a Welshman from Anglesey. He was found in a duffel bag, cut into pieces, in his bath, in his apartment, with SIM cards from his various mobile phones, it not as murder, but as suspicious circumstances.
Suicide.
In actual fact, on CNN last week, they said, the Metropolitan Police said it could be the result, bear in mind this is the man's body in a duffel bag in his own bath, they said this could be the result of a bizarre accident. They're not really sure who could be responsible. Now his apartment is 550 yards walking distance to the headquarters of MI6, Military Intelligence Branch number 6. There's many branches of military intelligence. When you join military intelligence, you do not swear an oath to serve the people. You serve the crown. That means that you serve the Saxe Coburg Gothas. And if you decide at one point that you don't serve those people, you may end up in a duffel bag in your own bath. Now that form of murder is called a bag and drag spy murder. And what they do is that they put your body in the bath, they chop you into pieces, the blood, the liquid, all the heavy stuff goes down the plug hole, they put you into a bag, and then they dispose of you by taking you on public transport. It's usually lobbed into the river, lobbed into a lake, that kind of thing. This is what the intelligence services do, and this is what the intelligence services have been doing for a very, very long time. The beginning of the intelligence services started in the 1500s under Queen Elizabeth I. And it was started by Sir Walsingham, and one of the most famous spies and espionage agents was Dr. John Dee, who is a mathematician and an astrologer and an occultist. And if you go to the Science Museum today, you can actually see his crystal ball, and you can see the slither of polished black obsidian rock, which he used to use like a black mirror to actually see images of demons and angels and spirits. And he was hired by Queen Elizabeth to be a spy. And she hired him to choose the most auspicious date for the coronation, for her own coronation. And there is this link between the occult, the spirit world, secret societies, espionage, and the royals. And what we have in the 21st century now is the result of that, which is this kind of plastic, Blade Runner style, modern, hydrocarbon society, where tax is the main game in town. So in 10 minutes, that's just a rough kind of summary of where we are. So the next thing I'd like to point out is that it's important for all of us to recognise what the game plan of the royal elite are. Things that you see reported on the news seem to happen in a kind of happenstance manner. Oh dear, all of a sudden there's a recession. Oh dear, all of a sudden there's a boom. Oh dear, all of a sudden, something else has happened on the news. Everything that you see on the news actually comes through news feed agencies. And there's 5 main news feed agencies. The 2 most important ones are the BBC. George Orwell, who wrote 1984, used to work for the BBC. And the second most important one is Reuters. And Reuters is owned by the royal family of the Netherlands. Yeah, and 2/5 of all news stories that you see ending up on your TV screens have been provided by those news feed agencies. What you're watching when you watch the news is not really the news. You're not seeing, for example, a report every day that 26,000 children died in the last 24 hours because of preventable diseases, which is the truth of what's going on. You're seeing a kind of smorgasbord of stories, news kind of events and photo opportunities which have been cleverly designed to shape your perception of what is going on in the world, and also to shape your perception that, yeah, I'm watching the news, I'm informed. The reality of the situation is, like I say, and you can check this with the World Health Organization, United Nations, Greenpeace, Help the Aged. There are thousands and thousands of people dying every 24 hours through neglect, through preventable diseases like the common cold. They say that there's no cure for the common cold. Every pub has got the cure for the common cold, which is cognac and whiskey. No virus or no bacteria can live in your blood with alcohol in your blood. As long as you have above 36% alcohol, 2 or 3 egg cupfuls, you take that, that'll cure the cold, and yet they say there's no cure for the common cold. Thousands of children are dying where they could be cured, but that's not on the news. What's on the news is really basically the agenda of what they want you to believe and what they want you to think about. Now, coming back to this plan, I'll just say it sort of briefly now and then I'll come back to it at the end of my talk. Since the 1500s, there have been secret rituals being done at royal palaces, and these are actually part of historical record. In actual fact, there's not only rituals that have been taken on at royal palaces, there have actually been cults started at certain royal residences, and the most famous one is called the Royal Alpha Lodge, that was formed at Kensington Palace. And that Royal Alpha Lodge has some very, very influential and very, very famous people as members. And through this whole series of historical events that have been going on since the 1500s, it's very clear once you piece together that there is a game plan going on by the royals. And what's happened is that spiritual entities that they've actually been invoking at these various kind of occult lodges in various royal palaces. I know this sounds very strange just to come out with this like this, but I've got to say it. Since the 1500s, they've been following a plan. They've been following a manifesto. The manifesto was written by Dr. John Dee, and you can actually see a copy of it at the British Museum. And the manifesto was dictated to John Dee from spiritual entities, which we would call demons, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. From the point of that manifesto, we've had death, destruction, pollution, wars, and an ongoing campaign to destroy humankind. And what happened is that Queen Elizabeth I immediately killed her sister, her half-sister. She killed Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, if you can imagine, historically, Queen Elizabeth, her mother was killed by her father. Henry VIII murdered Anne Boleyn. And so their daughter was then brought up in a kind of form of open prison. And you had Queen Elizabeth I, Princess Elizabeth I, and Mary, Queen of Scots. Elizabeth killed Mary, Queen of Scots, and what happened from that point onwards is a tidal wave of mass killings. Some of these killings perpetrated by the royals themselves have shaped history, and what's happened is that anybody that stood in their way, anybody that's criticised the royals, has been murdered. And they've had many different ways of murdering people throughout the ages: poisoning, fake car crashes, stabbing them, shooting them, you name it. Now, the important thing when you look at this history of stabbing and killing and poisonings and fake car crashes is that the Romanov royal family of Russia are the same family as the Saxe, Coburg, Gothas. The Schleswig-Holstein, same family that sits on all the thrones of Europe. And since the 1500s, they have taxed the European people. And tax is the main game in town. Tax does not exist merely to upkeep your country, to pay for schools, to pay for hospitals. In actual fact, if you really sit down and you work out how much tax they're taking, officially, in income tax, every 12 months, they take £660 billion in income tax. Every 12 months from the British people. Now there's 337 million people in Europe. There's 67 million roughly in Britain. Okay, we're one of the most densely populated countries in Europe. If you really sit down with a calculator, a pen, a piece of blank paper, and you work out £660 billion every 12 months, it's not difficult to work out that if you go along to your local nationwide building society and knock on the door and say, hey, I've got £660 billion to put in a nationwide super saver account. The amount of interest that you get on £660 billion in 12 months is enough money to actually run the schools, run the hospitals, and run the basic infrastructure of the country. There is not really a reason why taxation should be this continuing kind of stone around everybody's ankles, where we're all like dragging around income tax. Now, normal working people have the tax taken directly out of their wages. That's PAYE. If you're a very, very wealthy person, let's say, I don't know, Lord Rocket, say, if you're an aristocrat, you are Schedule D. That means you are not PAYE. That means that you tell the Inland Revenue how much you make. You tell the Inland Revenue how much your property is worth. You tell the Inland Revenue how much your valuable artefacts are. And then they will calculate the tax, and they say, oh, Lord Rocket, your tax is this much. And you say, all right, thank you very much. Now, this has led to massive, massive corruption. Lord Mandelson, Lord Brocket, Lord Jeffrey Archer, these people are massively corrupt. And the ongoing taxation regime which we have at the moment has led and bred to more and more and more illegal uses of public money, more and more corruption. Thank you. Cheers, Ian. And just to give you one example, the day before, September the 11th, 2001, there was a photo opportunity in a press conference with Donald Rumsfeld. And he was under a bit of pressure from the US press, and the US press had a question, and it was this: why did 3 accountants from the Pentagon resign their jobs and go public? And so Rumsfeld formed a photo opportunity and a press conference. And the reason that those 3 accountants resigned, and the reason they went public, is because 2.3 trillion, that's trillion with a T, that's what comes after a billion, has gone missing. Now, most of us are happy if we are cleaning and doing the hoovering that we find a £1 coin down the back of the sofa. They're actually looking for $2.3 trillion. That is so much money that if you then went with that amount of money to the nationwide and put that into a super saver account, you would have enough money coming in as interest. You are not spending that 2.3 trillion, just spending the interest, you would have the equivalent gross national income of Romania, Hungary, Greece, Spain, Portugal, France, Germany, which has got a big economy, and the United Kingdom all put together on the interest from your local nationwide branch, with $2.3 trillion that has been lost. And so those three accountants resigned. There was a press conference. Donald Rumsfeld said, yes, it's very difficult. It's a matter of life and death because this is money for the defense of the nation. And then kaboom! The next day we have 911. It's all forgotten about. It's all forgotten about because the news agencies, the news feed agencies, like the BBC, like Reuters that I said before. So if you can imagine, it's like the old magic trick where you've got each news story is like an upturned egg cup with a P under it. What they will do is they say, oh my God, people have found out about $2.3 trillion, we'll just shift that around, shift that around, shift that around. Okay, and that's what you're watching on the news. And it fools people who are part of the political system. I go for, now and again I go for a cup of tea with my MP, who's Clive Everard in Elton. He used to be a London black cabbie, and I say these things to Clive, and he goes, it's absolutely amazing all of this. He's just a cabbie, he doesn't understand any of this himself. And then one day I was explaining all of this kind of thing to him, and he said to me, he goes, I wondered why they didn't give a desk to Ken Livingstone when he became a member of Parliament. Even people in the political arena are fooled by this kind of, soft shoe shuffle of corruption. All right. So coming back to what I was saying, there is an agenda. Nothing that you're seeing is happening by accident. Nothing that you're seeing is an accidental message. None of it. Everything that you're seeing is either there to distract you away from what's really important, or it's a kind of smudge and fudge situation, like we saw with Gareth Williams, the MI6 guy, who the police then smeared his character, saying, well, we don't know what he was doing at night. He could have been, going out with male prostitutes and all this kind of thing. That's to fudge and smudge the situation so that nobody asks the question, hey, isn't there a license to kill? Doesn't that exist? There is a license to kill. People in the British military intelligence services have licenses to assassinate. And these assassinations are the result of very, very careful planning. They have folders and research dossiers on every single leader in the world. And if they need to assassinate somebody, they will say, there you go, 007, there's your license there, go to Romania, they'll be there in such and such a day, and good job, jolly ho, and do the business. It's been going on for years and years and years, this kind of thing. And Dr. John Dee, where you can go to the Science Museum and you can see all the paraphernalia that he used to actually invoke spirits and demons to get information from the spirit world on behalf of Princess Elizabeth. You can go to the Science Museum and the British Museum and actually see the stuff, all of his paraphernalia that he used to take along to, what's the big palace in West London that's haunted?
Hampton Court.
Hampton Court. He used to take that along to Hampton Court and he used to have soirees. Not soirees, seances. Saying, what is going to happen, where are we going to find diamonds, where are we going to find diamonds, and all this kind of thing. That was really going on, and to a certain extent it's still going on. Now, to put into a nutshell in a pub like this with a very limited amount of time to speak. They've been following this plant and poisoning of the oceans. The complete and utter poisoning of the land through agrochemicals. And now they're poisoning the sky. And if you think that's not true, you only need to do a little bit of research and you'll find that fish reserves are, really under a lot of pressure. The biosphere is really being poisoned. These nasty entities that dictated this manifesto to Dr. John Dee in the 1500s that recommends the division of the planet into a so-called New World Order. This was a phrase which was first used during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. These nasty, evil, I suppose, demons, if you want to call them that, have taught the royals not to be compassionate for their families, not to be compassionate for their friends, not to bring up their children with love, but to stab and slash your way to power, kill no matter what it takes, take control. In actual fact, you can see in the manifesto that mankind, that's us, we are treated as an abomination. Humankind is an abomination. All living creatures on planet Earth is an abomination of creation. They believe, the royals believe, according to the information that was given to them in this special language called Enochian by Dr. John Dee, they believe that they are born to rule. The royals believe that they are separate to us, and we have this phrase that they have blue blood. The blue blood is actually a misinterpretation of a historical fact that some of the royals have blue urine. The most famous example would be King George, and there's a film made about him called The Madness of King George. And he had a disease called porphyria, and that was because generations and generations of inbreeding amongst the royals has caused their urine to turn blue. They also have androgen hormones in their brains at a much higher level than most ordinary people. Androgen hormones are pumped out by glands in the brain when you kill someone and you enjoy killing. So if you look at, say for example, the cousins of the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, which are the Romanovs, the Romanov Russian royal family, and Ivan the Terrible, who used to strangle animals for a laugh, and had raped girls and raped his servants, and just went on a serial killing spree, and he'd killed many people by the time he was about 25 years old. These androgen hormones are pumped out in glands in the brain. Not only that, but those glands are actually inherited by the children. So you have porphyria, which gives you blue urine. That's a genetic problem from the inbreeding. Then you have androgen hormones, which is centuries and generations of the royals sending thousands and thousands and millions of people off over the top, fight for king and country. Go over the top, you man. You're not fighting for Britain. It's Blackadder. All those centuries has led to their blood being different, through the hormones, through their urine being different. And that's all verifiable. I'm not making that up. It's not like I'm standing here saying the moon is made of cheese or anything like that. That's all verifiable stuff. Alright, so have I been going an hour yet?
Don't think so.
10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes? No, I've been going on about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
How long is it before an hour's out, Kitty?
About 15 minutes, I reckon.
I've got another 15 minutes before an hour's up because they're changing their tapes then, you see. So they have a plan, and the plan is to actually destruct the biosphere and to kill all humankind. And people say, what? You know, how can you poison the planet when they, the royals, have to live here as well? They don't think like that. They have no compassion for animals, they have no compassion for people. What they've been taught secretly for 4.5 centuries now is that this is not reality. This is not reality. Reality exists in the spirit world, and in the spirit world they are the kings and the queens and the rulers and the royal dynasties in the spirit world. And these demons that dictated this manifesto for a whole new world order to Dr. John Dee in the 1500s actually say you kill everyone. It's nihilism, it's hedonism, it's nihilism to the nth degree. Kill everyone, jettison everybody's souls into the spirit world. And once they're in the spirit world, then you can really get to work with really enslaving people's souls. Now that, I know, sounds very strange, but when you look at Tibetan Buddhism, they believe in reincarnation. You've got lots of other cultures that believe in reincarnation. You've got lots of people nowadays who believe that they've lived before. Some of them are crazy, but some of them aren't crazy. And what I believe from all my research is that we all have thousands of lives, that we are a soul which is actually sort of held within this kind of body, and this body has a certain useful function for whatever, how many ever years. You could get hit by a car, you could die naturally, whatever, and you'll come back. And if it's not your time to die, you can fall out of a passenger jet at 30,000 feet and land in a Romanian forest and end up walking to the nearest campsite, knocking on somebody's door saying, "Excuse me, can I use your phone?" Because if it's not your time to die, you will not die. And that's what I think is really the cosmic plan. And the reason that they don't like the reality that we have with a beautiful planet, and we can experience relationships with each other, and we can enjoy all of the fruits of nature, is because that is really getting out into nature and bonding with animals and bonding with the biosphere. That actually takes you out of this terrible hydrocarbon, fake plastic kind of Blade Runner style world that they've created in order to actually keep you psychologically enslaved and physically enslaved, so that they can tax you and grind you down. So we'll have a break there. Okay? We'll have a break there. Any questions so far?
Chris, if that's the dark side, we've got to get to the light side.
Oh, we have, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking Darth Vader turning round, or...
Oh yeah, yeah. There is definitely a light side. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's definitely a light side.
Can I mean,
I'll get a tape for you, darling.
if everything's the one,
Yeah.
if everything is, if it's just the one, right? If you look at the yin and yang, and you've got the dark and the light, then
Well, the royals don't consider themselves to be at one with us.
I can understand. Fair enough. Yeah.
But aren't they planning to stay on the planet, or are they planning to eject themselves onto another
But
planet?
I always thought you never sit on your own doorstep. And what's the point of destroying everything if you're going to still be there?
Well, they might be planning to emigrate to another planet.
They own a lot of.
Are we talking
other
about the
countries.
Georgia Guidestones? Like,
Yeah,
The minimum of people, which is them,
yeah,
with enough just to serve their needs or whatever.
yeah, yeah, probably.
It's just that the
Yeah, I think that's probably. Yeah, I'd just like to say about how important it is for you to realise that the internet and the whole World Wide Web, you know, I've been speaking about the media and the news feed agencies. They're controlled. Newspapers are basically, in the Western world, owned by three major players at the moment. You've got Murdoch, you've got Berlusconi, and then you've got another cartel. Their main company is called Clear Channel. They own thousands of radio stations. They own thousands of newspapers. And there again you have another example how the information that you're given is actually coming from very, very tiny numbers of sources. Now I'd just like to also talk about D-notices. A D-notice is a form which is faxed to any editor of any newspaper, any commissioning editor of any TV station who broadcasts something such as the talk which you're listening to now. And the D-notice is sent by fax by the Foreign Commonwealth Office if it's a foreign newspaper, or it's sent by the Home Office if it's an issue to do with the British media. Once that D-notice is received by that editor, the existence of the D-notice is forbidden for even discussion in the public domain. And the D-notice is a standard form, and it says, on such and such a date, at such and such a time, you carried some information which is now forbidden to be repeated into the public domain. This notice is also forbidden to be discussed. And that's what you call a Home Office or a Foreign and Commonwealth Office D-notice. And they've actually issued D-notices on some of the most fascinating subjects, including things like UFO crashes. They've issued D-notices when Peter Mandelson had a loan, that's loan, of £370,000 odd from a man called Geoffrey Robinson, and in exchange for this loan, Mandelson told Geoffrey Robinson, if you want a job in the government, you can have a job. What job do you want? And Geoffrey Robinson was saying, well, you know, I'm not sure, what have you got? He said, well, how about Postmaster General? And Geoffrey Robinson wrote a biography actually explaining that Mandelson took this £370,000, went to the Nationwide Building Society in his local high street, and actually illegally gave the Nationwide misleading information on a mortgage application form, and actually got a mortgage on a property. And in the recent expenses scandal, where we saw all of these members of Parliament claiming for things like baby blankets when they don't even have any babies, claiming for, you know, the moat around their house, like Douglas Hogg, is it? He claimed nearly £26,000 for the moat to be cleaned around his house. This is what your taxes are being used for. There is so much money being sucked out of your wages that this is an ongoing thing that's just an open door to corruption. And in actual fact, the royal elite, the Romanovs, the Saxe-Altenburgs, the Saxe-Coburg-Gothers, the Battenbergs, they like hiring corrupt people to be their politicians. And the more corrupt you are, the more secrets you have in your closet, the easier it is for the royal elite to actually crowbar your decisions in Parliament. to make sure that all the decisions in Parliament go in the favour of the royal elite. I'll give you one example. Up until very recently, it was only 26 or 27 years ago, homosexuality was an imprisonable offence. And we had one homosexual Prime Minister after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. We had one homosexual boss of MI5 after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. And the royals choose these people like Sir Edward Heath. My grandmother worked for Sir Edward Heath. He had a flat in a place called Dolphin Square in Pimlico. And if you go there today, this is a place where it's a kind of centre of male prostitution. And the reason it's a centre for male prostitution is because many politicians, many undersecretaries, many of the people that work for Buckingham Palace actually have apartments in Dolphin Square. And this is the kind of person that they like. This is why you get people like Mandelson, who's resigned from the cabinet twice. I mean, he resigned before he was pushed. And that's putting it mildly. You get people like that returning back again and again and again in this cycle of politics. This is why you see the faces change from one administration to another, but the policies don't change. The reason the policies don't change is because there is this plan of culling the population through war, polluting the planet, and this has to be pushed through by these public puppets. And democracy has never existed. And one of the reasons why it's never existed is because these corrupt politicians, like Geoffrey Archer, who was the chairman of the Tories, Mandelson, who is now, I believe, Lord Mandelson. Thank you there, Eddie. All these people are used as very useful cogs in the machine to keep this velvet steamroller of this plan of global destruction, keep it going, doesn't matter what happens. And I'll give you another example. Has anybody here heard of a man called Maxwell Knight?
I've heard the name, I can't remember what it was.
Okay, well, Maxwell Knight, when you watch the James Bond films, and James Bond has to go into this underground place and they give him an Aston Martin with machine guns and an ejector seat.
Q.
The boss, that's Q, he's the technical boss, but his boss is M. And the reason that M is called M is because that's based on the life of Maxwell Knight, who was the boss of MI5. And he was homosexual, but he was in relationships with women, but that was a kind of Valentine marriage. And he had his offices where he was running MI5, not in the main MI5 building. In actual fact, there wasn't enough space left for him. He actually moved, and he was running the whole of MI5 from Dolphin Square in Pimlico. The reason that there wasn't enough room in the old MI5 building is because there was a revolution, a people's revolution in Russia. And what happened is that this was a real revolution against the Romanov family. And the Romanov royal family is the same family as the Saxe-Coburgs. They're the same as the Windsors. And people were revolting because they didn't have enough money to buy a loaf of bread. There were queues. They were queuing up just to buy a pot of yogurt. They were, being pushed around, and the people of Russia had had enough. That was the real Russian people's movement, rather like today's truth movement. What happened is that all the original leaders of that real grassroots revolution were murdered. and philosophers and aristocrats and actors were shipped in from all over the world by the Romanov royal family, and they even sealed a train that had Lenin. Trotsky was actually living in America. America paid, the CIA paid, for Trotsky to be trained in how to organize street revolutions with Molotov cocktails, how to create violence in riots. Marx, Engels, all of these people were on the payroll of the Romanov royal family. The Romanov royal family then put out a press release through the controlled media saying that they had escaped into a coal mine, and the floor of the coal mine had collapsed and most of the Russian Romanov family were killed. And that's the official version of the Russian Revolution. What really happened is that all of the Romanov Russian royal family came to London. And they took up the whole of the 5th floor of the MI5 building on the side of the Thames, and they designed and ran communism. The new communist system was a system where people would queue up for hours and days to get some food. Well, they were doing that before anyway. In actual fact, what happened is it didn't improve people's lives in Russia at all. And what we've had in the last 100 years or so is 2 major big experiments being conducted by the royal political elite. On the one hand, you have a system which we call communism, which is a system where nobody can get any credit, nobody can get any loans, nobody can actually own anything. And on the other side of the coin, you've had more than enough credit, people being given 100% mortgages. If you buy an apartment, you can have a free Porsche. And what they've done is that they've tested these 2 systems to find out which of these systems is more economic, more cost effective to control the populations. And the one that they favoured is the one where they get us all into debt. And they lead us into this kind of boom and bust cycle, and that's really what is now being transposed onto Russia at the moment. And the reason that Maxwell Knight had to move out of his office and ended up in an apartment running military intelligence from a private apartment is because the Romanov family were on the top floor of the old MI5 building, and they had 100 people with 100 electric kettles boiling water constantly 24 hours a day, steaming open every single envelope that was sent with a letter from one person to another in Russia that could possibly expose the scam. And there's a great book which you can get, 2 books actually. One is called Spy Catcher by the former assistant director of MI5, Peter Wright, and on his first day at work he was there filling in his form, and the lady, the receptionist lady said, "Excuse me." He said, "Yes." She said, "You're new here, aren't you?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Are you a Freemason?" He said, "No." She goes, "Well, you won't get very far unless you're a Freemason." That was his first day at work. And it's an amazing book. And Margaret Thatcher spent millions of our tax money on barristers and solicitors trying to ban the publication of Spy Catcher. So that's an important book to get. The other important book is called The Man Who Was M by Anthony Masters, and that really shows you what MI5 is like. It shows you what those intelligent spy masters are really like. And if you want to watch something that's good about it, watch The Prisoner. The Prisoner is an amazing TV series. Once you understand the weird occult things that the royals believe in, once you understand how the intelligence community work, and once you also find out that there is a camp in Scotland, near Inverness, which is where spies who know too much are actually kept in this camp. And the chap who wrote the scripts for the Prisoner TV series with Patrick McGoohan told Patrick McGoohan, hey, this is really going on, we're going to make a TV series about it. And that's why The Prisoner, when you first watch it, doesn't make any sense. You think, well, what's going on? Who is number 1? Who's number 6? What is that number? Who's number 2? I'm the number 3. That's how the intelligence community works. It's all on a need-to-know basis, and they recruit from Oxford University and Cambridge University. That's why in The Prisoner, all of the spy chiefs who are sitting there in their control centre with their surveillance cameras are all wearing university jackets. That's why Patrick McGoohan's got a university jacket, because if you're a stiff upper lip aristocratic student at Oxford, one day you're invited to tea and you'll be given a piece of paper that's got the words Earl, Viscount, Baron, Duke and King written on the piece of paper, and some old Don, he will say to you, could you put those in the correct order? And if you can put those in the correct order, in the correct aristocratic order, you get invited to tea again, and eventually you get offered to work for MI5, and you have to swear an oath to serve the Crown, not the actual British people. So now I think it's time to watch a bit of video. Hey, shall we watch a bit of video?
Yeah, let's watch some video, Chris.
Now, JFC Fuller is Britain's most decorated, most celebrated military strategist. He was a British Army officer, stiff upper lip officer, and he was friends with the King. In actual fact, he used to go fishing with the King. And he received many, many medals for developing automated warfare. It was JFC Fuller's idea to have tanks run robotically, and he had this great plan to really mechanize warfare, to automate warfare. And JFC Fuller foresaw the beginnings of unmanned aerial craft, which would be used for reconnaissance and bombing. JFC Fuller foresaw the use of enormous tanks, which would basically just trample down most of the world, and there wouldn't be anybody inside driving these tanks, and they would just go around as killing machines. And JFC Fuller also foresaw the development of things like the cruise missile. Well, JFC Fuller was a full-time strategist for the British military, but he was also a full-time occultist, and he wrote a book eulogizing Aleister Crowley and describing Aleister Crowley as the new Dionysus. And the book that JFC Fuller wrote is called The Star in the West. And in fact, JFC Fuller, that's the British Army's top military strategist, was Aleister Crowley's right-hand man.
This is an unconventional war. It's a different kind of war. It's not the kind of war that we're used to in America. Because the nature of war has changed.
Now, JFC Fuller was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, and Crowley was the author of a book called The Book of the Law, which calls for an age of carnage and bloodshed, which Crowley described as the Aeon of Horus. And JFC Fuller took this idea from Crowley's Book of the Law, and he formulated the strategies which are now being funded by our tax money. This is actually happening right now. The war of today, the war of the near future, is not going to necessarily involve humans. It's going to involve cyber creatures such as this snake, which has been developed by the Israeli military. And these snakes have cameras at the head which transmit pictures to satellites. We've got these cyber horses which have been designed specifically to carry payloads and to carry guns and to hunt down freedom fighters in mountainous regions such as Afghanistan. There is going to be nowhere where people will be able to live in peace. This is all part and parcel of the original plan put forward in the Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley. These cyber horses are going to be deposited by helicopter and by aircraft, and there's going to be thousands of them roaming the mountains 24/7. Now, at the Robot Control Center in Baghdad, in Iraq, we see military people using Xbox and PlayStation controllers, sending robots out into the streets, searching vehicles, stopping people in the street, taking photographs of their faces and storing that information into databases. We've also got these tiny pack bots. They're called pack bots because they fit into a rucksack. And these robots are being thrown into people's houses in the middle of the night. They go upstairs, they interrogate and terrorize families. And Obama says he's going to pull the troops out. He's going to take all of the troops out of Iraq. But the question is this: will those troops be replaced by these types of robots?
Wherever the operator looks, the 3-axis gimbal on a remote vehicle looks. What happens is the operator is fooled into believing he's actually on the vehicle.
Now, in the last 10 years or so, microchips have been developed which are designed to be injected into our bodies. Each of these chips would have a unique code. It would, for example, contain your social security number. The reason why these under-the-skin chips have been developed is so that remote control identification can be done by robots which patrol our workplaces, patrol our colleges, patrol our schools, and patrol our streets. The whole reason why RFID under-the-skin chips have been developed is so that these robots can then go along and detect who is chipped and who is not chipped. And if you're not chipped, presumably you're going to be off the database, which means that presumably you could be termed as some kind of terrorist or antisocial threat to this incredible system which we're seeing funded from our taxes. And these tiny patrol robots are being manufactured in their thousands, and they're going to be deposited all over the planet. And if you remember the 1960s cult TV series, The Prisoner, with Patrick McGoohan, there was this kind of rover, kind of balloon that was sent out to actually chase people that had escaped from the compound known as the Village. Well, there are robots which have been designed, again from our tax money, which can go over all types of terrain. They can be sent out to search and to chase people who've maybe, for example, a political prisoner who's escaped from somewhere like Guantanamo Bay or some other torture center which has been funded by our tax money. These robots know no boundaries. They can actually not only go over all different types of terrain, but amazingly they can also swim on the surface of water, and they can swim underwater as well. And these types of robots will be dropped in their thousands across areas where the authorities want to track people, chase people. There will literally be nowhere to hide. This technology is not 10 years away, this is today. Now, if you're somebody who believes in democracy, if you're somebody who believes in freedom, if you're somebody that believes that investing billions and billions of people's tax money in this type of technology is antisocial and anti-democratic, then you might want to have some kind of street protest. Well, there are very, very specialist and very sinister robots being developed in Japan to deal with rioting. This footage is actually a fake riot that's been put together by the German police authorities. And this footage comes from a Japanese techno expo, where you can see a riot police officer in full riot gear getting into this enormous robot. Now, the people that are standing there are journalists who attended this Techno Expo, and I can tell you now that the journalists were absolutely horrified. They were terrified when this thing started up, and this thing is armed to the teeth.
That's a little bit of a film that I've been making for the last 2 years, and it's out this week. And the thing is that
Could we have the lights on again, please? Thanks.
the point I'd like to make is that there are a lot of really interesting and fascinating bits of information that are coming through from lots of different authors. And some of you went to see David Icke, and I've known Dave for a long time. And ever since he came, ever since I started broadcasting on the Enigma channel, I've been in touch with him. The point is that at the moment I think that there's not much time for real liberty and for people to have meetings like this in public gatherings like this. In actual fact, there are already laws against public gatherings like this that they could invoke if they wanted to, and it's just a matter of choice with the police whether they want to actually break up a gathering like this. And that's really 60 odd years ago how Nazi Germany was managed. Now, if you look at the real history of Nazism and the Gestapo and all this kind of thing, you have to understand one thing, and that is that Prince Charlie Coburg, who was a British prince and who was Queen Victoria's favourite grandson, who grew up in Britain and was brought up in British palaces, when he became 18, he went to Bavaria. He took over his hereditary land titles, he put on a German military uniform, and he funded the Nazis. And he was a British prince, and he was Queen Victoria's favourite grandson. These wars which we're seeing, where, say, for example, it's England versus the Nazis, or whatever scenario you see played out on the television in front of you, the same factors, the same families are running both sides of these conflicts. The main game in town is control of the population, leading eventually to a massive culling of the population. And while we've had, Dave's been writing about, reptilian things, and Alex Jones has been telling us all to buy gold, they've been developing and manufacturing enormous numbers of these robots. And these robots are being deployed and they're being controlled by networks of space-based geostationary satellites in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and soon they'll be controlling the population of Syria and Iran. And they are asset stripping these nations of their opium, of their oil, and eventually, because these are desert countries, they will be asset stripping the solar power from Iraq, from the desert of Iran as well. This is the main game that they've been following all along. What we're seeing today is no different to the asset stripping of diamonds from Sierra Leone and South Africa in the 19th century. It's no different to what we see with the asset stripping of oil from the Ogoni land. If you remember, Ken Saro-Wiwa was actually hung. He was actually murdered assassinated a judicial murder along with some of his other activists by order of Royal Dutch Shell, which is a hydrocarbon conglomerate which is owned partly by Queen Beatrix and partly by Queen Elizabeth II. And we don't really have much time to discuss all of these. You know, they are interesting things about reptilians. There's a lot of historical data about them. We don't have much time to discuss whether the moon is a spaceship, and we don't really have much time to buy gold. In actual fact, if you do go out and buy gold, you're putting money directly into the pockets of a very, very small number of families that have always controlled the world bullion market. And so what I see basically at the moment, and this is the reason why I've made this film, is that there's not that much time left for us to have these kinds of meetings. And my series of films about the Illuminati have really concentrated on the Edwardian, Georgian and Victorian secret societies and the history of how these secret societies have ceded all of the major, most powerful and influential seats in government. The reason why I've made Superstate, and I've actually made 2 Superstate films, this is the first one, is because I want to bring all of this bang up to date. And you have to now get prepared that if you are going to go on a demonstration, if you are going to go into any kind of public kind of scenario like we see with the police rounding up anti-Bush demonstrations like we saw in 2001, where they corralled everybody into Oxford Circus and kept them there with helicopters buzzing the crowd.
Kettling, call it kettling.
Yeah, kettling. This is going to be done with the assistance of robots soon. And we're going to have the police actually having robots. And already now we have a situation where burgers are being served by robots at McDonald's restaurants in America. And millions and millions of people rely on those low-paid jobs. We've got robots, they're going to take over, they're going to be robot prostitutes, there's going to be robotic receptionists. This is going to be exactly like we've seen in any one of dozens of sci-fi movies, Blade Runner, you name it. It's all not the future, it's actually happening right this minute. And really this robotic or cybernetic new world order is something which really basically I think is the most important aspect to the control mechanisms which the royal political elite are using to suppress us. And that great big riot robot is being manufactured right now by General Motors, who are a car manufacturing company. They've set up a mass production line, and if there was going to be an anti-Bush demonstration walking along this road, you'd see one of those things sooner or later coming along as well. It's exactly what you see in George Lucas films, the Clone Wars.
They're making a lot of police redundant now, 45,000.
Yeah.
They're bankrupt.
Yeah, and also the Ministry of Defence, they've just released a new fighter jet that has no pilot. Now, the thing is that at the moment we do have mutinies. There are mutinies in the British military. There are certain mutinies within the British intelligence services as well. Friends that I met when I made my documentary about the assassination of Princess Diana told me that from time to time there are orders given to go out and do something and there's a mutiny. It's a quiet kind of thing that's done with memos and nice oak-panelled offices, and at the moment the RAF are refusing to candy bomb certain villages in Iraq. Candy bombing is where you have military jets flying in and low doing a sortie on an Iraqi village, and instead of dropping bombs they're dropping these great big plastic bags full of boiled sweets, and the kids run out for those sweets. And the RAF have given up doing that because there's sadistic people who take these amphetamine sulfate pills who are part of the American Air Force. They're called GO pills, and they've been dropping grenades in the sweet bags, and so there was a mutiny, but that was hushed up in the media. And the robotic cybernetic aspect to what we're seeing now takes that human consciousness, the compassionate force of humans, out of warfare. And this is something which they've been working on for a very, very long time. And it's going to come right down to the street. They're going to take the compassionate aspect of, say, for example, a copper who comes along, you've got the wheel of your car parked on a bit of pavement where you're not allowed to, and he lets you off. That's not going to happen anymore. You know, you're going to have these motorbikes that have got robots on them that come along with this robotic arm, and it stamps this holographic imprint on your windscreen, and the next time you go through one of the tolls, like the tolls on the Dartford Tunnel, you get stopped and your credit card is automatically debited a huge amount of money. And this is the automated population control mechanism. This is the next era which we're entering into, and this is what I've been trying to put across on various social media. I'm trying to tell people, hey, the reptilians, they run everything. And of course this information is so mind-blowing for ordinary people that they can get ridiculed. And ridicule is one of the weapons which are used by mainstream media personalities like Wogan. Okay, anybody that has a kind of compassionate view, or a view which is completely different to history, will get ridiculed. And ridicule is no good, because once you're ridiculed in the media, you won't get invited onto question time. So my advice to everybody is that we need to put together some kind of manifesto which is based on common sense, that is basically going to rid us of the royal political elite. We really don't need those people anymore. Rid us of this incredible burden of taxation. We only really need as much tax as government costs us to run. We don't need any more tax to be taken away from us. And by hook and by crook, we need to actually do what Tony Blair did, which is where he infiltrated the Labour Party and turned it into New Labour from the inside. And that is a tactic which the Bavarian Illuminati used. They infiltrated Freemasonry and twisted the Brotherhood kind of teachings of Freemasonry into being a Luciferian secret society. It's a very, very successful method that certain groups throughout history have used. And if we're going to learn anything, we need to learn that if you speak the truth straight and you don't say things like the moon is a spaceship, and you just show people these are the facts, and you do end up appearing in the media or even in the local paper or on Question Time, you will find that just through 2 or 3 minutes of exposure in the media, millions of people will stand up by the side of you. And we can see examples of that with George Galloway. We can see examples of it with Martin Bell, who basically ran against those crooked Tories, the husband and wife. Martin Bell, the Hamiltons. You know, Martin Bell was standing there. I've had enough of this corruption, and he gets voted in because people have had enough. Now, on the continent right now, in Greece and Italy and France, there is the broom movement. The broom, you know, that you clean things with. And these people are turning up. They're walking down the streets without any prior warning with the police. Usually, if you have a large number of people in the street, you have to have that organised with the police. The broom people aren't doing that. These are just ordinary people. They are, some of them, cleaning ladies. Yeah, and they're turning up with their brooms on street corners until they've all gathered together, and then they walk together going and they did a thing in the Champs-Elysees, and Sarkozy was absolutely terrified, and they brought 2 military choppers in to evacuate the Elysee Palace. Now the broom movement is just a typical example of the power of all of the billions of people. There's billions of us and only a handful of them. And the broom was used in America 100 years ago as a symbol of cleaning out corruption in the American administration. And if you watch the film Brother, Where You Bound, is it? Brother, Who Are...
Oh, brother, where art thou?
That's it, with George Clooney. You can see that 100 years ago they used to have a midget with a broom in the political campaigns, because that used to represent somebody that was sick and tired of Freemasonry, sick and tired of corruption, sick and tired of insider dealing, insider trading, and the broom is a brilliant symbol for that. And this is basically what it's got to be like, you know, and it's got to be, you know, a movement with a heart, and it's got to be a movement that doesn't stay inside cyberspace. There's millions and millions of people now who the CIA, using data mining technology on things like Facebook and MySpace, now know who are the people who are politically aware. And there was an interesting clip which I saw the other day of a talk it was in a room at the United Nations. It was a guy, I can't pronounce his name is Zbigniew Brzezinski. And this guy gave a lecture, and it was for officials of the United Nations, and he says in this clip, there is a global awakening through the internet which has never existed before, of millions of people who are now aware of how they are being controlled. And he was saying this for the benefit of these UN people, to try and say to them, hey, watch it, because this is the first time there's been global communications like the internet. And so what we're going to see is we're going to see net neutrality, which is the way that the internet works, being shifted in favour of big websites run by the big corporations that are owned via the stock markets by the royal elite. Did you know that the UK headquarters of Google is in Buckingham Palace Road? Did you know that the royal family run the Royal Channel on YouTube? When you get a big company like Google, it starts from nothing. Apple started in a garage with hippies taking acid. They issue shares. Millions of those shares are issued. Quite frankly, those bosses don't understand who those people are who've bought those millions of shares. They're bought by pension funds, investment funds, merchant bankers, stockbrokers who have lots and lots of clients who live all over the world, and after a certain time, the original bosses don't know who own their companies anymore. The policies change. And this is what's happening with Facebook, it's what's happening with MySpace, it's what's happening with Google and YouTube. So you must rely on those things. You should use them for what you can, use them to say what you want to say, but in terms of the truth movement existing in cyberspace, forget it. Forget it. It's going to be wiped out within the next few years. What's going to happen is that websites like mine that show documentaries and movies about things that, you know, they don't want you to know about, when you log in, it'll take you 15 minutes for the login button to even appear. This is how they're going to arrange it. Whereas if you want to log in to Sky Sports, it'll be there like that. So that's how they're going to do it, and they're going to do it through email as well. Your emails will all be digitally read. They will be all digitally analysed for certain subjects. In actual fact, Hotmail was found out just recently because a lady that sent a recipe for making an apple pie ended up having loads of apple pie adverts inserted into her Hotmail emails. And that's because they were testing a system that actually reads all of the emails digitally, analyzes what your main interests are, and then loads you up with loads of spam and adverts. those spam and those adverts slow the data rate down, and so that's how they're going to manage the whole situation.
So we can just put nitro and nitroglycerin and TNT and see what happens to their system then.
Yeah, see what happens to you.
Yeah. The helicopter will be over the house instantly.
Nice bit of weed killing and a lovely little bit of diesel boiled up does makes a nice piece of jelly. Don't know whether you know anything.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, that's that's how people who are freedom fighters around the world, who fight for real democracy, are being labelled as terrorists, and that's what it's like. So that's it, really. Basically, is there any questions?
Yeah.
All right, Chris.
Where do you see you obviously put the royal political elite at the top, if you like the Illuminati or as the Illuminati. Where do you see the Vatican and the top international banking family, like the Rothschilds? Where do you see them in the scenario?
Okay, well, the Vatican and the Rothschilds. The Vatican is the same as the royal family. In actual fact, if you look at the symbol of 33rd degree World International Freemasonry, it's an eagle with two heads looking in different directions. The actual top of the Vatican is not run by Catholics. Those people just use that as a system. And that double-headed eagle is really basically running the world. And what you've got is you've got the poor southern hemisphere nations being controlled by the Vatican and Eastern Europe. That is really where their power bases are. And that's where they run child prostitution. That's where they have all of the money flooding in on the collection plates. The Vatican is an intelligence network. It's based on an intelligence network exactly the same as Buckingham Palace and MI5. What happens is that confession boxes all over the Catholic world, you've got the priest there, and people go into the confession box and they say, I did this, Father, and I did that, Father. And the Father then tells the Monsignor, and the Monsignor tells the Cardinal, and the Cardinal tells the Pope. And this is why the Sovereign Order of the Knights of Malta has a joint office with MI6 inside the Vatican, because it is actually a whole system based on intelligence. So the Vatican and the Bavarian British royal elite, they are on the same level. Below them, you then come to the Rothschilds. NM Rothschilds is an established merchant bank, and when we saw the sell-off of the privatisations of British Gas and the water companies, if you looked at those posters, like Tell Sid, British Gas shares, in tiny, tiny writing in the corner of those posters, it said these shares are issued on behalf of Her Majesty's government by NM Rothschild. Rothschilds are wrongly cited in lots of conspiracy literature as being the people that run the world. They don't. They are offering services to the royal elite, which means that NM Rothschilds have got offices all over the world. They're involved in buying and selling shares and setting up nominee companies for the royal elite so that they can buy shares in Google, buy shares in YouTube, buy shares in Facebook. That's how they've become misidentified. They are providing facilities for the royal elite. They're not running the show themselves. Of course, they've built up the enormous portfolio of investments themselves, and lots of people say that there's large tracts of land in Israel which are actually owned by the Rothschilds. That's probably true. But if you look at the tracts of land which the Crown Estates own, this is the front organisation of the Windsors. They own the whole of Regent Street. That's why it's called Regent Street. The nephew of the Queen is the Duke of Westminster. He owns the Palace of Westminster, where the House of Lords and the House of Commons are, and they pay rent, huge amounts of rent to them every day. The Grosvenor estate is owned by Prince Charles. That's the whole of Belgravia. That's where you see Jack Barclay, Bentley, the Porsche, the McLaren showrooms, Marble Arch, that's the Grosvenor estate. Outside of London, there's two great big giant duchies. The Duchy of Lancaster, which is the personal wealth owned by Queen Elizabeth II, and the Duchy of Cornwall, which is owned by Prince Charles. Now you'll know from looking at the recent, I think it was in the Telegraph, they had the map of Britain with all the points where there's going to be 11 new nuclear power stations built in Britain. One of those is going to be in Gloucestershire, right on the doorstep of Prince Charles, who sells organic produce to Sainsbury's. 55% of the foreshore of Great Britain, that's Land's End, Bognor Regis, all the Great Yarmouth, all of these big tourist areas, 55% of the foreshore is owned and controlled by the Crown Estates. All those marinas, harbours, beaches, that's where you find the nuclear reactors. That's where you find all the nuclear facilities. The nuclear industry has always been a plaything of the royal elite. And when you look at these new 11 nuclear facilities that they're going to build, they're all going to be built on Crown Estates land. And it's something to do with what you call atomic alchemy. The transmutation of one metal into another has been something which has fascinated them for many, many years. And I've just written a 40-page article in my magazine called Feed Your Brain magazine that shows you that these particle accelerators, which are like underground tunnels, which are enormous, like miles and miles long underground tunnels. There's one called CERN, it's so big it goes under the ground of France and Switzerland. What they're going to do now is they're going to insert nuclear reactors in these particle accelerators. They're going to use acid now. There's so many thousands and thousands of tons of nuclear waste. They're going to dissolve that in swimming pools of acid. Then what they're going to do is they're going to boil that acid into a plasma gas. They're going to shoot the gas into these particle accelerators, whiz this gas at ridiculous speeds, like almost the speed of light, and use super powerful magnets on the outside of the particle accelerators to sort of pull the molecules of the nuclear waste apart. And some of the heavier neutrons and electrons will fall, and believe it or not, some of that dust will be platinum. And this is what they've been after all along. The transmutation of one metal into another, like lead into a gold, is ridiculed. But in actual fact, in hundreds of nuclear facilities around the world, they are transmuting metals. Alchemy is a reality when they transmute uranium into plutonium. The reason that Sellafield and Windscale and La Hague in France has got these rotting swimming pools full of this waste is because they've been storing it, waiting for this technology to come online, where they're now going to turn it into plasma gas, and they're going to now create uranium into plutonium, and plutonium into platinum, and then platinum into gold. And this has been one of their plans which they've been following since the 19th century. Now, this toxic waste is really one of the major threats we have to humanity. Chernobyl, April the 26th, 1986, poisoned a third of the planet. People are dying of thyroid cancer today in Alsace-Lorraine, which is on the border between Germany and France. We still don't know the exact number of deaths from Chernobyl. Chernobyl was no accident. Chernobyl blew its lid because the safety mechanisms had been deliberately switched off because they were doing tests. You know, this nuclear waste is now being dumped everywhere. The background radiation is 300 times more than it was at the time of Madame Curie's experiments in Paris, and she died. She shriveled to death from radiation. So, you know, there is not much time. They're issuing these robots. If you can imagine a nuclear power facility being run by robots, that has a leak, and a robot isn't programmed to even know or understand what a leak is, those robots will keep that secret because they don't understand what is going on. There won't be any whistleblowers in any of these nuclear facilities like Karen Silkwood, who was murdered because she tried to get trades union representation into a nuclear facility in Ohio. And we don't have much time.
Silkwood.
Silkwood. If you see the film Silkwood, yeah. There's a great film called Silkwood and another film called The China Syndrome. And all of this nuclear waste is a legacy which, quite frankly, you know, no head of state, no compassionate person who really respected the population would ever allow 1,600 tons of nuclear waste to go on our railway systems every year. No one with any compassion for the British people would ever do that. They've trashed the planet. In actual fact, the British Virgin Islands, one of them is owned by Sir Richard Branson, they've just discovered 1,500 rotting barrels of nuclear waste which were dumped there in the late 1950s from Aldermaston. In the British Virgin Islands, which is, you have to judge the situation by their actions, and their actions have been not irresponsible, they've been sadistic, cruel, they funded Hitler, they funded millions of people to be killed, they assassinated Diana, they poisoned us. That's the end of it. Basically, that is what you can see when you look at it in the cold light of day, and you strip away Alex Jones telling you to buy gold, and you strip away the moon being made of titanium. You have to see things for what they really are. And the truth movement is sort of being led astray with all of these. They are interesting subjects. I'm not saying we shouldn't have books about those kinds of things. It is interesting, but you should keep your eye on the tiger. And you should judge the royal political elite by their actions, not all of these stupid, meaningless words that you see going in a cycle on programs like Question Time.
Why don't we just wipe them out?
Sorry?
Why don't
We
just
have
wipe
got the
them out?
weapons.
You don't need to wipe them out. You just need to neutralise them and disconnect them from the control lines. That's all you need to do. You see, the
If
thing
they're
is,
still there.
How are we going to get
it is
into
a problem if they're still there, like you have with France.
Sorry, how are we going to get into the mainstream sort of political system, because there's so many safeguards put in place to prevent that
like
from
this
happening.
Really. You know, real people in real places.
But that is with the help of the internet, of course, but without trying to rely just on the internet.
Yeah, you mustn't rely on the internet only.
So to infiltrate is obviously talking to our MPs,
yes,
and then running. Yeah. But the project is running for.
Yeah, I mean, you'll find when you go to your MP and you discuss these things at this level, most of these MPs are pretty decent people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Clive Everard, you know, I was talking to him about nuclear waste going backwards and forwards on the trains to Dungeness. And, you know, he'll sit there in his office and he'll sit there and goes, "It's amazing, isn't it?" You know, that's good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. It shows that he still has some compassionate humanity within him. Yeah. It shows that, you know, he's amazed as much as anybody is. And in actual fact, but he's not doing anything about it. He will write letters, no question about it. I mean, he said to me that an MP has no power, but he does have the power to actually solve problems that people bring him by writing letters and getting a dialogue going. And I think that's true. I think that's a very honest...
If they really don't like the subject matter, they'll just tell him, "Don't bring this up again."
Well, these are in private surgeries. This is where you can get 15 minutes. If you go to the Eltham Community Centre and you're a constituent of Clive, he's there one Saturday every month.
Yeah, I'm going to see my MP this Friday.
Well, there you go. Yeah. There you go. You've got like 15, 20 minutes. It's the way that you approach these subjects. If you go in there with one of Dave's books, and he starts saying, well, what's all this about these reptilians then? And they're going to say, what reptilians? Because they really don't know. Many of them don't know anything. They are just there, they're creaming whatever they can out of the local council.
I think you've got to work within, we're all in a pyramid,
Yeah.
pyramid. So
Yeah.
what we've got to do is work in our own little pyramid and try and switch lights on.
That's right.
I've been on 5 Live umpteen times.
Yeah.
Nicky Campbell's show.
Yeah,
Moran,
Nicky Campbell, I've been on his show, yeah.
Richard Bacon a couple of times.
Yeah.
Richard Bacon's an arsehole, but anyway.
Yeah,
You're
it doesn't
right.
matter. It doesn't matter. You can still go on his show. It's a dialogue.
And it can be about any issue. It can be about Wayne Rooney, and you can still pull in.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
certain
it.
aspects. And that
Yeah,
kind
in
of
actual
thing.
fact, the amount of phone-in programs is being, like Talk Sport now. That was always, it used to be LBC, and you used to have phone-ins, and you used to have opinions from the public 24 hours a day. I'm mates with James.
Which side is he on? Is it side?
No, he's on our side.
Yeah.
Oh, James is on our side, but at the same time, he has to be very, very careful. He's had a few bouts of cancer. It's not such an easy thing. If you have got a celebrity kind of profile to maintain, and he's been fired now, I think 3 times. He's been fired once from London Weekend TV. I mean, usually you only get fired once, that's the end of it. Like George Lazenby. George Lazenby was on the Simon D show, London Weekend TV, it was their biggest show, and he went on there and he said, I'm going to tell you now the names of the men who were responsible for assassinating JFK. Boof. The next day he was not James Bond anymore, and he was never on the television anymore.
Did he name people?
Yes, he named the same people that were named by Jim Garrison in the subpoenas. That weird guy in the JFK film, he wears a white. Yeah, Clay Shaw. Yeah, he names all of those people. And London Weekend TV wiped the tapes. That George Lazenby, Simon D thing doesn't exist anymore in the archives.
Was it going out live?
Yeah. Yeah, that was on the Simon D show.
Because I remember you was trying to find.
I've now become really good friends with Simon D's son and daughter, but they can't help me. They don't know anybody at London Weekend TV. London Weekend TV, by the way, was owned by David Frost, and then it became owned by Peter Jay, who married Jim Callaghan's daughter when Jim Callaghan was the Prime Minister. So you can see how narrow the media is controlled, and now there aren't, London Weekend Television doesn't exist anymore. It's been absorbed into the ITV Big Five, which is Granada and Carlton.
Same with all the little local, apparently local stations.
There were local ones, but they've gone now.
They're all controlled now.
They're all controlled, yeah.
Have you had much? Have you had much harassment in some of the films you've made about the Illuminati? I mean, I felt that your film about the Kabbalah was extraordinary because it expressed a huge sentiment that I had felt for a very long time, and you reiterated it, which I'm very grateful for. I'll see you afterwards because I've got a very interesting thing on the death of Elias Crowley for you. I think I know the man who killed him.
Wow.
And I can put you in touch with him. He's still alive. He was a man who was blown through a ladies' toilet door during the Battle of Britain as he was running across an airfield. And they said, you're very educated and your body's too broken, you can't fly airplanes anymore, you're going to become a lecturer at a college. And he became part of a secret project about 1943-44 where he investigated 50 investigations of psychic occurrences where planes went out of control, flew in bizarre directions, no one could control them, and then when they landed, there was nothing wrong with them, and they'd flown to avoid flak and stuff like this. People appeared in aeroplanes and stuff. This was really spooking people out. There was a lot of, they'd suppressed it, and he was a part of an investigation, an unofficial investigation.
I've actually got friends of mine filming at the Temple of Sheffilu. They've been filming there, they've been camping out in the forest, which is this place in Sicily, Sheffilu, where Aleister Crowley had his temple where he was initiating various aristocrats and various people. So we're filming it because the place was closed down, but it still exists. And
what's the ancient historical basis of that place?
I don't know. The best person to ask is Leo Zagani, who's Italian, and he's actually filming. He's filming a report. He's filming a report for my TV channel right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The metaphysics behind the Roman Empire, the invasion, Caesar's invasion of Britain.
Yeah.
I discovered this place where the first Roman crucifixions took place. The real reason that Caesar came was to acquire the knowledge of metaphysicians in southern Kent. 4 times the Roman people left Boulogne Harbour on bright sunny days, and 3 times they were smashed up by storms in the middle of the English Channel.
Yeah, that's very true. They actually came here and considered, it was even in Julius Caesar's diary, that the aristocrats from the Italian Roman Empire were sending their children to be tutored by the Druids, by the British Druids, and Pontius Pilate was actually born in Scotland.
Wow!
Yeah, because the aristocrats actually were very, very interested in the stone circles and in how the natural electromagnetic ley line energy in the British landscape had actually been unblocked and put into sort of circular curve, sort of day after tomorrow, is that those stones are like an acupuncturist's needle being inserted into the Earth's crust, the same as an acupuncturist puts a pin into the skin of a patient to unblock energy. That's what Avebury and Stonehenge and Calnish and Newgrange and all these places are doing. They're unblocking energy, but then they're putting the energy into the cursus ditches. See, everybody is focused on those stones, but most of those sites have a ditch, a circular ditch that goes around the outside. That's where the earth energy that has been pulled and recircuited is.
That's fascinating. 2 things I'd quickly say. The Romans were using ley lines for a process of communication.
Yeah.
I did some work at Stonehenge about 5 years ago. What's the mystery of this place? The message that was come back to the group of people was, as far as you're concerned, the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. A bizarre answer, which has since been distilled. Basically, there was this metaphysical group in Britain, there was a metaphysical group in Rome. Think of the Romans as playing the Americans, think of the British playing the Cubans, and the Romans basically said, dismantle your device and talk, because we are the only kids on this block. And that was something to do with why Stonehenge was dismantled.
Wow. Well, that sounds interesting. I've never heard that one before.
Okay, well that's just an interesting
Yeah, it is interesting. Eddie?
All I was going to say is, getting back to, if you like, a 5 sense level, because I was thinking about taking the Kent Freedom Movement. I don't know if you've heard anything about like the proposed Bank of England Act, where there's this new group.
I just saw something about it just the other day.
About, like, just making a few, amendments to the Act. So basically, so we stop borrowing money off of private institutions and start with, like, the government issuing it themselves. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole story is that, if you have an honest person who's elected as an MP and they work their way up and they end up becoming a junior minister or a full minister, these private undersecretaries who always keep their jobs regardless of whether it's Tory or Labour come in on the first day and say, right, we've got a copy of your manifesto where you're trying to improve the health service there. Very good, very good, very good. We're going to explain now why you can't do any of that.
Yes, Minister.
And you're going to say,